At this time, I'd like to introduce Dr. Glenn Platt with the Armstrong Institute for Interactive Media Studies, or AIMS, as we like to call it here. AIMS is a program that examines how digital media is impacting traditional disciplines. Indeed, it is involved in projects to change the way that digital media change the disciplines in which they operate. The program has grown in size from one course in 1996 to over 30 courses in 2010. Today, Dr. Platt, along with two of his students, Eric Hodgson and Noah Bornstein, will demonstrate for His Holiness the work that has been done here at Miami to develop a first-of-its-kind, three-dimensional mandala. A mandala is a colorful graphical symbol of the universe frequently used by Tibetan Buddhists for meditation purposes. Dr. Platt will explain more. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Platt and his students, Eric and Noah.
As Dr. Hodge indicated, my name is Glenn Platt. I'm co-director of the Armstrong Institute for Interactive Media Studies here at Miami University. I want to introduce two of my colleagues. This is Noah Bornstein on the far side by the screen, one of our AIMS students who recently graduated, and the director of our Smale Visualization Center, Eric Hodgson, Professor Eric Hodgson. And what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about a number of projects that we've been undergoing related in a broad sense towards the preservation, the digitization, and the celebration of Tibetan culture. Thank you, Eric. So, to better understand the genesis of these projects, you really need to go back to 2005. In 2005, as you heard from President Hodge, Miami University's Department of Anthropology and Professors Sidki and Akers began taking Miami University students to Dharamsala, India, and developed a relationship with the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics in the Sarah campus there in Dharamsala, India. And over the course of the years, began a process that was really an embedded relationship, taking our students there to understand, learn Tibetan culture, and over time leading to, as President Hodge indicated, the signing of a memorandum of understanding when Provost Herbst went out to Dharamsala, India. Now, when Provost Herbst went out there, he had conversations with a number of people, not the least of which is Geshe Lakdor, Geshe Dandul, and Janpal, who all indicated that there was a certain amount of need around digital technology and how digital technology can help preserve Tibetan culture. And so when Provost Herbst returned, I promptly went on a plane and went out to Dharamsala, India, to the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics, and spent time with my friends and colleagues there to discuss how digital technology could be used to help in the preservation of Tibetan culture. And over the course of my time there, we identified 3 projects, and those 3 projects are what I'm going to talk to you about today. When I returned from India, we began these projects in the spring of last school year, and so the students who worked on these projects have all gone on to fabulous jobs, most of which didn't let them come here today, but there are 4 of them who've returned, one of them in fact from Hawaii, so she's come a far distance, and I'd like to ask the 4 students who are here who worked on the project, and again these are part of the team, if you could just stand up for a moment. Thank you. So the 3 projects I'm going to talk to you about today, first begin with a project around creating an online tool for teaching the Tibetan language. The theme around these 3 projects is really about how we can take the teaching and the understanding of Tibetan culture and expand it beyond simply what was going on in the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics, but rather have it be part of a process and an experience for people anywhere, anytime. And that is the beauty of digital technology. Digital technology allows for ubiquitous learning everywhere and anywhere. And so the model that we're using as we develop these projects is taking the activity that occurred in Dharamsala, India, and making it available for Tibetans, for scholars, for people like you and I, who might be interested in learning about Tibetan wherever we are in the world. So the first of these projects was to take a language book that was recently written by the monks and the instructors at the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics at the Sarah campus, and converting that into an online tool, a resource for people to learn the Tibetan language. The second of the projects I'm going to talk about relates to the digital archiving of precious documents that are in the Tibetan archives and libraries in Dharamsala, India. How do we take those documents, how do we take those archives and make them available and preserved both in perpetuity and for people regardless of where they are? And the third of these projects is, as President Hodge had indicated, the creation of a virtual reality mandala. So over the course of our short time here this morning, I'm going to introduce you to each of those three things. Now, the first of these projects, as I indicated, is our Tibetan language project. Our Tibetan language project was begun by the students, as I indicated, to take a book that had been written by the monks at Sarah College and make it an online tool. Now, one of the things they learned early on in, and they were the ones who came to me with this suggestion, was that simply understanding language is not enough. That without understanding culture and context, the language doesn't have the power and meaning that it ought to have. And so what the students suggested was, instead of simply building a tool to teach the language, why not also build around it a tool to help the understanding of the cultural construct that goes around that language. And so what I'm going to, you got the mouse, all right. What we're going to show you here is the website and the tool that we've developed for teaching the Tibetan language. This is our Learning Tibetan website. The few pieces I'm going to show you here today, first are the language piece of it, which we're going to click on Learn, the second link at the top there. And this is the digitization of the texts that have been written by the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics. It has a number of different lessons within it, lesson 1 through 13. There are different pieces that are available online. The piece we're going to show you is lesson 1, the beginning always being a good place to start, and the 30 consonants. Click on next. Now here you can not only see but also hear the different consonants.
Ka, 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 nga.
Yes, those are all different consonants. I want you all to be clear about that. The other complication in learning the language is that, in fact, the language sounds and is spoken differently depending on gender. So the tool allows for the switching between genders.
Ka, 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 nga.
And in this way, you could move between all of the different consonants, which we're not obviously going to do today, but those are part of this set of tools that we're developing for and with the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics. But as I said, the other piece of this is understanding the cultural structure around that. And so there's a culture portion of the page that is really just an introduction to different aspects of Tibetan life and Tibetan culture. For example, dance. Provides some background about Tibetan dance and actually includes an embedded YouTube video there if you'd like to actually see the dance itself. Or, for example, food. In fact, last night my family and I had momos for dinner, which we were so excited to have. One of my favorite Tibetan dishes. And lastly, the site has a set of resources that we really hope are a jumping off point for people interested in learning much more about Tibetan culture, about His Holiness, about the teachings and processes and practices of the Tibetan people. And as you can see, it's grouped into categories: movies, audio, and video, other categories related to Tibetan learning centers. Both the Institute for Buddhist Dialectics as well as Miami University's program are on here. But also includes things like social media. So for example, from here you could actually see His Holiness's Twitter feed. So I hope you are all following him as I am. It really redefines the definition of followers, doesn't it? Right? The second of our projects was related to the Tibetan archives. And in particular, here is the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives in Dharamsala, India. And this is what the physical space looks like. In this space, documents such as these pejas are wrapped in beautiful silk and are actually ancient texts that look much like this. And these texts, of course, are subject to age, they're subject to wear, and the lessons within them, in sort of an ironic and important way, are very impermanent. The documents themselves are slowly falling apart. And so the interest on the part of the Tibetan Library was to take all of these documents and be able to preserve them, but through digitization, but then also share those anywhere in the world. And so they asked us to provide some guidance along that process. And so our students developed a set of instructions, a set of guidelines about the scanning and the metadata and the things that one does to electronically preserve these documents. But they went one step further. What our students did was contacted a Miami University alum, Mark Nelson, who is part of the Google Books project. Google Books has experience and expertise in digitizing and preserving literally millions of documents, including rare ones, for years. And we brought the Google Books project team in as advisors on this to help us advise the Tibetan Library and Archives on the best practices and processes, and ideally help in creating what we hope will be an online resource not like this, unlike this, where anyone anywhere in the world could be able to access, read, and work with the preservation of these documents. The last of the projects that we're going to show you here today relates to the 3D mandala. Now, when I went to India and I spoke with Geshe Lakdor, the head of the Tibetan Library and Archives, he told me with great pride, he was telling me about their 3D mandala they had in the building there. Now, I'll tell you a little more about what's happening over there in a moment. The geisha told me about the 3D and mandala, and I was so excited about it. A mandala, as President Hodge indicated, is a bit of a meditative map. You visualize yourself within it, and you visualize yourself moving within it. So what better medium to help visualization than to actually have a virtual mandala that you could move within? Now, the 3D mandala that the geisha came down and showed me was actually a model. It was a physical model, much like you see models of buildings from architects. And so when he showed me this, I suggested that maybe we could take advantage of some of the skills that our faculty and students have here at Miami to build a virtual one of these. And ideally, not just a virtual mandala, but rather a mandala that could be shared, where people could be in the mandala in multiple places in the world and participate and speak with each other. And in fact, ideally, and in the next phase of this project, a mandala that responds to your feelings and emotions as opposed to clicks on a computer screen. So we came back to Miami University and began the project of doing that, and I'm going to introduce you to the director of our Smale Visualization Center, Professor Eric Hodgson, who's going to tell you a little more about that. Now, what you will see on the big screen is a 2D version of it, because we don't have avatar goggles to give to all of you, or an avatar projector projecting on the screen. What His Holiness will be seeing here is actually 3D, and so he's going to be viewing it on 3D goggles, and we'll see what this looks like in an immersive virtual world. Professor Hodgson. Thank you.
All right, so this is a picture of a two-dimensional mandala, and as Platt and Dr. Hodgson said, this is a tool that's commonly used for meditation. A typical form of a mandala, you'll see a square with a circle inside it, and there's usually the 4 gates at the edges of the square, and each quadrant of the mandala is represented by a different color. There's obviously a lot more intricacy to that. Mandalas are really embedded deeply within the culture, the religion. If you were on campus earlier this week, you might have had a chance to see some monks actually creating a mandala grain by grain, filling it up over several days. And that kind of thing, it's a very interactive process, building the mandala, creating it. There's also a lot of interaction at the end of it. One of the great themes is the impermanence, actually destroying a mandala that you took several days to create. So we wanted to take those themes and that kind of structure and bring it into a three-dimensional space and create an interactive experience around that. And